Hello, my name is Mariana Ruiz-Temple, Chief Deputy State Fire Marshal, and the following presentation is an Agency Rep Incident Command System presentation to show how law enforcement officers and members of Oregon State Police can integrate with the incident management teams while on a wildland fire. If you have any questions, please let myself or Major Hyder know. Thank you and stay safe. So, part of the reason why Major and I have been talking about a lot of these types of things is in regards to the solar eclipse last year. So Rob, you were like fully immersed in that conversation last year. But our agency was really focused on emergency response plans, coverage plans, and then after Chet Kobar, the deputy and the superintendent and Major Hyder were really focused on sending troopers there. And I don't remember the amount of troopers that we sent, but it really kind of set the tone for, I think, how leadership wants all of us to react to fires in the future. I know that, Rob, you guys have always been involved in them, but I think for the first time in terms of Chetco was the first time we really saw that amount of folks respond to help from a law enforcement standpoint. So as we started talking in the off season, we talked about maybe just creating this training to give the three of you guys an overview of what does it really mean to be an agency rep in the field. And I think that most of you guys respond and you know your job and your jurisdiction, but how you guys can actually integrate with an incident management team, whether it's our office's team or not, right? So that's really why we're here. So we'll do a quick overview of our office's role in fire response. We'll go over the Conflagration Act, which is our enabling authorities, as well as our MO plan, talk about our incident management teams and ICS, and then talk about your role as an agency rep. So in my world is fire, there's terminology that relates to all of these things, and so that's what we'll be talking about, with the hope that if you send folks out there or you serve as an agency rep, those are two different things, right? Just so that you know how to liaison with those folks and how that works, and so just an awareness. So OSFM's role in incident response is similar for that first bullet, ESF4, so that's emergency support function. There's 18 in the state of Oregon, and each state agency that has a responsibility as it relates to the state operations plan has one. And Major Hyder, I don't remember your number. 16. Right, so this is the, if there's a major disaster in the state of Oregon, the ECC will be opened up at the Readiness Center, and there is a state agency rep for each of these ESFs. So 16 essentially means that state police is in charge of law enforcement as it relates to large-scale disasters in terms of the operations plan. The Office of State Fire Marshal is in charge of ESF 4, which is firefighting, and ESF 10, which is hazmat. So there's a lot of supporting agencies under each of those. As it relates to 4 and 10, we are the state lead. We're co-leads. So in 4, we're the co-lead with ODF because they respond to wildfires. We respond to wildland fires that affect communities. In ESF 10, we're co-leads with DEQ. So then the bullets below just talk about what our authorities are. So we respond under the Conflagration Act. We respond, and that's just for fire. We all respond under a state of emergency. We can have intergovernmental agreements. We do with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. That's what gives us the authority to respond to Warm Springs, for example, or other tribal lands. And since they are a sovereign nation, we don't have authority to respond unless we have that BIA agreement. So that's the one that allows us to do that. Emergency Management Assistance Compacts, all ESFs may at some point be tapped into that. That's a compact that allows all 50 states to receive and send aid across state lines. So right now, if we respond to California, there's no tort liability, there's no workers' comp, there's no ability legally for us to get across state lines in any of these ESFs, theoretically. So this is the compact that allows us to do that. So when we mobilized to California this last year, we received a request from the state of California through EMAC, and then we mobilized through EMAC. So if there was a significant law enforcement event in Seattle, that would be the compact if they needed, law enforcement capacity. And then the mobilization plan, that is, I've just brought a copy. If you guys wanted to look at it, it's right there. But that is our mobilization plan. That is the way by which all ESF4s operate and mobilize in the state of Oregon. essentially the State Fire Marshal's office is in charge of the mutual aid system for the entire state of ESF4, for the entire state of Oregon. So just kind of so you understand how we get there, the Conflagration Act is ORS 476510. It gives us our powers and our duties and basically outlines what's expected of our office as it relates to conflagration. So we are required to have a state plan. We're required to provide a mobilization process and system, and those are all under 476510, and we do that through our mobilization plan. And in order for us to invoke the Conflagration Act, there's certain criteria that exist. We have to go to the governor, so we work closely with the governor throughout the summer. We have to get her approval before we mobilize and invoke that. So that's something that happens fairly quickly. A little bit more about the history of it. It actually came out of the civil defense measures in 1940. So when the state of Oregon was concerned about the bombing, the Japanese bombing, we're in World War II, all of those things. That's really where the Mo plan came from. And then we didn't really use it for fires until 1972. So he has a copy of it. But basically, and the reason I want to highlight this, Major, this might be something that you might be talking about with Tracy, is that this actually talks about everything, our roles, our authorities, reimbursement, all of those types of things. But as Checobar happened, we kind of struggled from a law enforcement standpoint. How do we track you guys? What do you guys get paid? How do you get reimbursement? Because you're all eligible for FEMA reimbursement, right? And this is the document that we use to define that. So Tracy isn't here today, but I know she'll be working with you guys. So if you send folks to a fire, you have the ability to recoup those costs. And having a document that says, for law enforcement, for example, your vehicle will be $20 an hour, or if it's per mile, whatever that is, that's good to have so that you can turn that over, and that's how your battle rhythm is for your entire response. So these are things I would say Rob's pretty familiar with because he's been out there a lot. In Oregon, we have 33 fire defense districts. We have 36 counties, but defense board districts. And each district has a fire chief, which we refer to as a fire defense board chief. And it's his or her responsibility to manage resources. So once, let's say, Bend Fire exceeds their capacity and their local mutual aid, then they'll go to that fire defense board chief to request our office to come in and bring resources. And so that is essentially how the system works. The incident begins, it goes to mutual aid, and if they deplete that, and a lot of times this time of year, it gets depleted fairly quickly, and then they have to request the conflagration. And I would say those 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th bullets, those can happen really, really quickly. We know, we can start watching things. For example, the Grand Fire this weekend, it happened pretty quick. Like we kind of heard chirpings, and then it was boom, it's happening. So we walked through probably those first 8 steps really quickly, and then we would mobilize. We have an incident activation conference call, and it's typically with the local fire defense board chief in our office to get the information to make sure it meets that level of need. And then we request our IMT, and our resources are sent. So one place for improvement as we try to do more together, if and when it's appropriate, if you guys are actually out there on the ground and want to be part of that activation call, we could create a process to include you guys in that. We'd love to have you on there, but that's where you're going to get that boots on the ground, that initial essay to find out like really what's going on. And I'm sitting in Salem trying to figure out what really is going on because I have to tell the governor, and then she has to make a decision. So that's what that call is about. And sometimes, having local folks there, we have local ODF or the local fire chief, but a lot of times when it comes to law enforcement, we don't have anybody on there, and that could be a good conversation for evacs and numbers that are affected. So all of those happen pretty quickly, and then we're able to invoke the conflagration and send out resources. So incident command system, I think most of you guys have been through all these classes. I just like to make a plug for it. It is essentially and historically, its origins have always been in fire. I think that in the 70s, it's the system by which we've managed these large-scale wildfire incidents. But certainly after 9/11, it was looked at as a way and a model to respond to any large-scale event. So after 9/11 is really where you saw, these terminology, these type all-hazard teams, and started to be used for Cascadia rising drills or hurricanes or whatever. And I would say in Oregon, because we do fire so much here in the Northwest, right? We're really good at ICS and the process for mobilization. Other places that are really good at it are Southeast states that have a lot of hurricanes, for example, Texas, Florida. There's pockets of areas that get pretty frequent disasters that they have to respond to and use mutual aid and ICS. And so those all-hazard states are really good at those. And it's just, across I think the nation, in the Midwest as well, because of the tornadoes. They're really building these pockets of all-hazards teams, which are stronger if they have multidisciplined folks on there. I mean, then we'll go over this a little bit. We've added law enforcement officers as an actual member, standing member on our team, and we've, I think, made good inroads there with that liaison position. So just a little bit about all hazards. Our office has 3 Type 2 all hazards teams. And I think the reason that's important is that there's many different jurisdictions, right? If you look at a state of Oregon and you looked at GIS layers for where fire departments are, where BLM lands are, where ODF lands are, it's a patchwork, right? Everybody owns a piece of land and a responsibility. When it comes to our office and our agency, we are responsible for communities or pockets of structural protection. So if it's a ranch or two, we might not be out there, but there might be a different team out there. But when we send resources under the Conflagration Act, we're going to send our incident management teams. And that's generally where we see the interaction with OSP, because you're there because of evacuations, for example. So this is a picture of what our incident management team positions look like. Not that you have to know all of these, but it is command and general staff. So there are chiefs positions for almost every piece of ICS. We, in the Office of State Fire Marshal, added, if you look under that line safety, there's a box called law enforcement. So we have 3 law enforcement officers that are trained in ICS, that are trained in our incident management system, and their role is to liaison with that local sheriff. I mean, some sheriffs are really good at this because it happens a lot. Some folks don't have the capacity. Like if we're in Josephine County, it's even harder, right? So, and I know OSP supplements there too during fires, but having a law enforcement officer actually on our team allows us to just, that person can liaison with us. So we have 3. We have 1 from Yamhill Sheriff's Office. We have 1 from Portland Police Bureau, and 1 from Hillsborough PD. And they're actually a member on the team that goes out. So in some cases, I don't know if you guys have been out there, your folks, that would be somebody that you guys might be working with. So just a little bit about the tools, general awareness. We operate off of, the ICS process operates off of an incident action plan. That's what that is. It's 48 pages. It's really big. But it actually is our plan. It's our organized course of events. So we know going into the next operational period, this is what we're doing. And every position has a certain piece of this, but it is for all risk, all hazards. So for example, this event was for a line of duty death. We had a law enforcement officer because he was the liaison with OSP, but also helping with transportation and all of those things. But it's really the whole process of planning goes into this so that we can tell our operations folks what's happening. And it could be small, it could be as big as it's needed. This is our planning P, and this is where, as an agency rep, you guys may plug into certain things. So you'll hear, if you're in the ICS World Planning P, this is the process. Once you get through that leg there, that's initial response, then that circle is happening pretty much for every operational period. And it's all about the planning for the plan and executing the plan and communicating that plan to the operations. And there's pockets of where agency reps are needed to be part of that, depending on how many folks you have helping with the incident. So for the most part, when we talk about agency reps, we're talking about folks that are actually contributing to the objectives of the incident. It could be utilities, it could be ODOT, it could be OSP, whatnot. But this is our battle rhythm through the day. And this is just an example of Chetco Bar, and I bring it up because there's a lot of meetings, so I know that we're always in meetings. We're trying to work with the community, we're trying to work with our stakeholders, but if you're ever responding to a large-scale incident, one of the biggest things that you're going to see on there is that 10:30 cooperators meeting. It's generally around 10 or 10:30, but it's really about, that's where the incident management team works with you as an agency rep to hear your concerns or for you to voice your concerns. So if there's anything you take away from today, and we'll talk about it here when we get into the agency rep part, is that there's a lot of meetings. You don't have to go to all of them, but in order to get your interests heard and be part of the plan, those cooperators meetings, and they're generally around 10 or 10:30, it depends on the incident. It's probably one of the most important meetings for you guys to be at if they have them. So other agencies that are in ICS other than the incident management team, and this is where you guys come into play a lot, is the assisting agencies and cooperating agencies. And they mean different things, but it's not that it matters really to your folks out there, but an assisting agency is an agency that is supporting the incident objectives. So, and it's on the front page if you wanted to look at it. We set our objectives clearly every operational period, and if the objective is, for example, for evacuations, then you would be an assisting agency, for example, if you're there for that, or checkpoints, right? If you are kind of a stakeholder, you're not really engaged yet, sometimes you guys might show up just to kind of have a presence and provide, you might be a cooperating agency at that point because you're really not meeting the objectives or assisting in meeting the objectives. And then there's NGOs, so those are like Red Cross and shelters, those types of folks that are trying to assist or cooperate. But that's just terminology you might hear, assisting or cooperating. Typically, you guys are going to be assisting because you're going to actually be helping with checkpoints or evacs or those types of things. But a lot of times, you guys might show up, your folks might show up just to kind of help, what's going on. It's still important that they're doing this process so they know where to engage and work with the team. So agency representatives, that's actually a term and a position. And the thing that this is the most important thing is that you're not a part of the incident management team, you're not a part of the incident command, but you really are representing your agency. And you generally interface with that liaison officer or a PIO or incident command. And generally, when we're there, you're working directly with incident command. But I just bring that up because a lot of these large-scale, Chetco Bar type incidents, they have a liaison officer, and that's the appropriate place to really connect because the liaison officer is the one that's required to run those cooperator meetings, to call you guys if something's needed. So he or she really needs to get your information. So that's probably the number one thing, is just check in with that liaison officer or your incident commander. And again, agency reps work for their agency, not the incident. And so sometimes people kind of get into that battle rhythm, but really you're representing your agency. And when we talk about agency reps, we're really looking for folks that have high-ranking power. They're the ones that can make those decisions. So there's differences between agency reps that work within the system and folks who might be out there doing checkpoints, for example. Sometimes they're the same people, right? But if an agency rep is at a high-level incident, maybe it's a regional event, maybe it's another mal here, right? Something, or a crude oil event, we're really going to be looking for somebody that can make a decision. Those are the ones that are going to represent your agency and be part of the actual process. So just a few things that I think for those of you that have been out there, this. I mean, just check in with the team. It's important that you understand what the team expects from you to get your incident assignment and organization. I mean, sometimes they're going to look at state police and think that you guys can do evacs, right? But we all know that it's the AHJ, you're working with that local sheriff, and so explaining that's important. And I don't know, I mean, I would ask you guys, I look at Rob because I'm so used to seeing you out there. I mean, for the most part, you guys are doing checkpoints and kind of just liaisoning. I mean, have you ever had any other than maybe governor's visits, In different fires, I think we've really helped at building those. Um, they're calling them maps now, management action points. It really used to be, those evacuation zones. So whatever level of help you're doing, it's just important that you know what that is. We've run into folks where, and you guys probably would do it, is go do this, but you really are not the one making that decision, as it's the local sheriff. So making sure you understand what the team expects for you, and sometimes the team may not know what you can and can't do, right? So that's part of it. Established work location. I mean, I feel for OSP, you guys kind of come in and come out. It's not like you actually have to sit there and have a work location. A lot of times, if you're sending a large amount of resources, so let's just say this is a Mal here, for example, and you're sending a lot of troopers, and there is an IMT. The agency rep position generally has a position like at the incident command post, so that somebody knows how to reach you. So you guys may have 20 troopers doing something, and they're not the ones that are there. You're the one making that decision and representing them. It's an actual position. Just like if we went to the ECC, Major Hyder generally is the agency rep, and folks are out here doing stuff. So sometimes agencies send folks that may not have the power to make decisions, and that could be a little frustrating because we're looking at you to make a decision on behalf of your agency, and they have to call and go back. So it is the agency rep position versus folks that are actually doing something on the incident are two different things. I think we just talked about the resource use, so jurisdictional issues, command and general staff interaction. I think for the most part, when you are on an incident, you need to check in with that liaison. It's important that he or she has your information. A lot of things come up and we're trying to get a hold of each other, so that's why you check in, because they have that list. But a lot of times you're working directly with incident command. So this picture is Deputy Davey, and I forget the gentleman's name that's down there across from her. They're actually working at 10 o'clock at night to help create those trigger points, because that was what they were assigned to do. I think he's from Southern Oregon. What's his name? Lux, yeah. So for example, those two were, she was essentially the agency rep, right? And he was helping with some of those. So they're working directly with incident command at that point. And then agency rep stuff, I was an agency rep down in California. We brought 15 task forces down. There were special things that we had to do. We had to do, daily reports back to, my leadership, letting them know what was going on, to the governor's office. So it's a big deal maintaining that. You are, it's expected that, and fire is important, but when you get into different things like Mal here, for example, or if there's something else, like that is where this agency rep position is even more important. Is I, as an IMT, am not going to be briefing Superintendent Hampton on law enforcement stuff, right? Like that's what this position is for. So whatever, your agency demands, that's part of what the agency rep position is. And I think, I think back to Chetco Bar with Major Hyder. You and I talked really quickly. You guys made a decision, and you went down there too, right? You guys are making those decisions about accountability, documentation, what's expected. I think you'll see finance lean forward this year more about how to track it, because it kind of was, it was not as easy. And I know that that's something that they're looking at doing. So I just make a plug for create, not a MO plan necessarily, but a quick sheet about what you get paid. I mean, you get paid what your regular rate is, right, overtime, or if you want to get paid for your vehicles, what that looks like. Is it a log for mileage or whatnot? But all of that is FEMA reimbursable. So the more that finance leans forward with it and you track it at the time, the less you have to do it afterwards. This PCA stuff, once we get into fires, for example, where you know that you have folks on there, one thing I would do is make sure you let Major Hyder know or finance know, because we need to set up 2 PCAs. Originally, they were putting it all under the fire PCA, which goes to a different grant versus your stuff. So if we have a significant fire, that's maybe a trigger for you or one of you guys if you're sending folks to it, so that we can start tracking that. And claims, anytime you have damages as it relates to a fire, all of that is potentially reimbursable through FEMA. So when we go to a fire and we use gas is something that can be tracked and reimbursed. If you have so damage to your vehicle because of the incident, right? Not because of just a general MVA, right? But the incident, all of those things as it relates to working on there could potentially be reimbursable. So, and we could probably talk more about that later, but that's just something you might want to tell your folks. You know, I know they're really good at documentation, so if there's anything that happens, just have them document it. We could help them with that later. I think you guys know all this. We've tried to tie the levels with Ready, Set, Go. And typically you'll see that when we mobilize as an agency, we don't like to leave under a 3. That's really hard, right, to leave under a 3. So we're really working with our law enforcement liaison and that local sheriff to get to at least a 2 or a good glide slope down to a 1, because it's, you know, you can imagine what that would look like if we left under a 3. One thing I would say is that we're really thin on our law enforcement officer bench strength, right? So those 3 are covering each other for the entire season, and it may not work. So our plan B, I'm letting you know now, is to maybe just reach out to you and ask if we can have somebody assigned to the team, depending on what the incident looks like. So I don't know if that's something that you could fill, and maybe it's not like on a team, sleeping in fire camp, those types of things. But if we don't have one, it is really handy that we could be able to use somebody in that capacity. But right now we have good coverage there. They're trained in how to work with liaison. They're trained how to work in fire. They've been through fire refresher training. But for the most part, they're, you know, in camp working on those plans. They're doing just like what you said, calling for evacs and sending folks out there. But yeah, we have some potential holes this summer, so I could see us leaning forward with you a little bit on that piece of it. And then this is just general 101 stuff. You guys pretty much know that our ICPs are generally far enough away, but still close enough. And schools, fields, and fairgrounds, that's our favorite places during season, although these seasons seem to get longer, and typically towards the end of August, you know, we get kicked out of school. So always looking for places, typically fairgrounds is where we're at. And this is generally where we live for the most part, in the upper right-hand corner, in fields, and yurts, and I think this is Stouts Creek down south, but this is what it typically looks like. This is a little bit about what we tell our folks that are new, and you guys know this because you're in emergency response, but a lot of times those first 2 or 3 operational periods, you're not getting a lot of sleep. You're 40 hours into an incident, which isn't generally how we like to run, but, you know, high stress, having folks work through chain of command. I look at Eagle Creek, and that first night we had 2 different jurisdictions. So we had Hood River County with Multnomah County, and all trying to do kind of those evacs. And it got pretty stressful, right? But it's just trying to maintain that calm. And sometimes that's what you guys do as OSP coming in, is helping with that in those 2 jurisdictions. So anytime we can get OSP out there is super great for us. And then working through the IAP for that common goal. Obviously, if you've been on, and Rob, you were there for Eagle Creek, right? A couple days into it. Oh, yeah, that was a big one, right? Like we had 2 ECCs, EOCs open, 2 counties, and a lot of times so you have an incident management team there, and their job is just to manage the operations on the ground. We're really there to support operations, create the plan, give them the resources and tools to make them successful. But then you have counties who open EOCs, and I don't know, you know, we had 2 counties, and they were duplicating what we're doing. They want to get messaging out. They want to get maps out. It's almost doing the same thing that the team is. So we send agency reps sometimes to those EOCs to help, like, bring in the communication. And so you have emergency managers, you have mayors, you have commissioners, you have, you know, lots of things going on. And so that's just the extent of, you guys have been out there, all the people that you're dealing with, but trying to maintain the same process. And that's why having an agency rep there that we could say, Rob, the governor's coming, can you work with whoever you need to, right? Versus them coming to me or a PIO or, you know, whatever it is that OSP can do. That's the value of having that agency rep there. I would say maybe 5 years ago, before we had that good connection, you know, we're trying to do this and do that, and we're not doing it good enough. So just knowing that there's somebody there that can do that for us and help support us in that is really golden for us. And, you know, I mean, I know the governor, when she comes, for example, it is dialed, their comms folks are good, and OSP has the dignitary focus, but still having that ability, I think you and I did that at Canyon Creek, right? Like you told me all the intel, and so we knew all of that before we had to set the meetings up and stuff. So, and this is just, become part of the process. I think that if you ever were to mobilize and it was you or somebody else, we're really looking at you to check in with that team, check in with a liaison officer, incident commander, the PIO, and really you're there just to say, I'm the agency rep for OSP. They're going to get your information, they're going to get you what you need, and then start getting you into the system. So I think the biggest takeaway for folks is making sure that you're sending the right people to be agency reps initially, and then you assign your folks based on need. And then also as agency rep, make sure you know what's expected of OSP in terms of tracking, right? Like, we're trying to get better at that, but then you're able to tell your folks in the field how you want to track and how you want them scheduled and all of that. So Checo Bar could be pretty overwhelming, right? You had all those hotels to track, it just becomes bigger, quicker than you think. And so I think what I just wanted to convey is there is a system out there. We want to use OSP more, and you guys know when there's nothing going on, and that's your decision to make. But and the other thing is that there is a potential this fire season to, help us with that law enforcement liaison position. So really, that's all I have for agency rep. I wanted to play this video if I can. It's just 3 minutes.
This is the Northwest Interagency Coordination Center Predictive Services Climate and Significant Fire Potential Outlook, updated May 1st, 2018. Let's start by taking a look back at how well the Climate Prediction Center Outlook's verified for April. In the lower left corner, you see the CPC's outlook that we included in our last presentation, and in the upper right, we see the actual observed temperatures. The CPC's outlook at the beginning of April was anticipating below average temperatures in Washington and then equal chances for below, above, or normal through most of Oregon. Verification shows that really our temperatures were about normal throughout the region for April. When we look at the precipitation, we see a similar story. The CPC outlook in the lower left corner is showing equal chances for above, below, or normal precipitation in the area. What we actually saw was wetter than normal conditions across most of Washington and northern Oregon, while southeastern Oregon showed drier conditions than normal. If we extend the time window to include all of the water year starting on the 1st of October, you see that the temperatures along the coast were a bit cooler than normal, a bit warmer than normal in the mountains, but not significantly departing from normals. Similarly with the precipitation, eastern Washington showed a bit wetter than normal, while Oregon showed drier than normal. Consistently, when we look at the snowpack over the area, we see that Washington, that had the higher than average precip, is showing at or above average snowpack for this time of year, while Oregon is showing significantly lower than average snowpack. The drought monitor, which is updated April 26, shows similar story, with most of Oregon remaining abnormally dry or in moderate drought conditions. The Climate Prediction Center is projecting that those drought conditions will persist in Oregon through the period out to the end of July. When we look at the El Niño-Southern Oscillation cycle, we remain in a neutral pattern. We had a weak La Niña over most of the winter. By the end of March, that cool water off of the coast of South America has pretty much warmed up. The Australian Bureau of Meteorology has noted that all of the international models are showing a slight warming trend over the next few months, but not getting into El Niño territory, so we should remain neutral. Looking forward, CPC is showing pretty much equal chances for our temperatures to be above or below normal in May, while showing a bit higher chance that we'll have below average precip during the month. So we extend that for the seasonal outlook. Looks like June, July, and August will bring higher than normal temperatures and below normal precip to the northwest. So we'll have normal significant wildfire potential for the northwest in May as well as in June. As we move into July, we'll have an above normal significant fire potential for southeastern Washington and southern and north central Oregon. As we move into August, that area just extends, and we'll have above normal significant fire potential east of the Cascade Crest in Oregon and Washington, and also for extreme southwestern Oregon.
Every month, the Northwest Coordination Center puts a 3-minute video together and walks through it, but just wanted to give you guys that background also.